That Charlie's definitely.
People deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian. Man. Are we live? Of course we're live. People deluded. I'm back again. I've been trying to get this video done for a minute, but we're here. Frank, how you doing, my friend? And as usual, why not for tuning in, bro?
Yeah, no, I'm not too bad, bro. How are you?
I'm good, man. You're seeing what we're doing in the seat in the table. I don't look at the league table, but we're doing what needs to be done, man. We might as well kick off with that, yeah. Before we get into the isms and schisms, how are you actually feeling as an Arsenal fan? Not just this season so far, but off the back of last season, because it's fair to say we've announced ourselves as being a serious club again.
No, absolutely, I completely agree. And you know, I'm over the moon, deluded. And you know, I come from a generation of Arsenal fans. I was born 2001, so I only really know the FA Cups. Yes, whilst I was born, whilst the Invincibles was a thing, I don't know the success that some of the, you know, the older Arsenal fans know. So to be in this position, I'm absolutely over the moon with the progress, A, that we've made under Mikel Arteta, and B, you know, we're competing again. It's absolutely fantastic. As to if we're going to get it done or not, only time will tell. But we're definitely going in the right direction, and we're looking good ahead of the final running.
Facts, man. As you said there, yeah, in relation to Mikel Arteta, what do you mean by that? Like, what has Mikel Arteta done for you? What changes have you seen? And what reasons have you got to be positive on them?
No, yeah, well, I think it's quite obvious, in my opinion, in terms of the changes that have been made. You know, we were going through some dark times, Deluded. I'm sure you remember, even stretching back to, the Carling Cup against Birmingham and, you know, losing.
We've been in the trenches.
We've been in the trenches, absolutely. So, and it's not just, considering where we were towards latter years of Arsene Wenger, and obviously it wasn't a great time with Unai Emery, of course, as well. And the fact that, to be honest, even when Arteta first came in, it wasn't going great. I remember being one of the people that were saying Arteta out, probably not even 2 years into him coming into the club. And, you know, the fact and the way he's just turned around and has made the club, created a positive atmosphere at the club again. And that's been missing for so long. So to be in the position now where, you know, everyone loves Arsenal again, everyone's got confidence in Arsenal again. Oh, I say everyone, the Arsenal fans, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's a really great time to be an Arsenal fan. That's the way I put it. And I put that down to Mikel Arteta, absolutely, even just for the way that he's changed around the club.
I can't lie, we'd be here all day if we spoke about everything Mikel Arteta did, yeah. But if you had to say one thing, like the thing that's impressed you the most that Mikel Arteta has done, what would you say?
Well, that's a good question, actually. And I would probably give the answer as being, you know, just the players he's brought in, and, you know, the way he's just sort of come into the ground and put his foot down. You know, there was a lot of players before his time that came in, you know, didn't have the right mindset as per se. And Mikel Arteta's come in and he's got rid of players like Guendouzi, he's got rid of players like Aubameyang. And don't get me wrong, whilst they were fantastic at the club, it was quite clear that that relationship wasn't going to work. And I think in the long term, it's benefited Arsenal, Arteta, making those changes and bringing in the right players, bringing the right players through from the academy, and just, you know, people and players that are of a good mindset and really aspire to win things at Arsenal and want to be at Arsenal. I think that's the best thing that he's done for the club so far.
I think that's facts, man. For me, there'd be a couple of things, really. I would actually say, you said it there, I would say for me, the atmosphere, because I remember his first press conference and he spoke about the non-negotiables, being competitive, all of these things, which he's doing great. And I love that, you know, big up Mikel Arteta, because I do feel at the Emirates or at Arsenal during the Emirates era, a lot of people, whether it's been previous players, not Wenger, but previous managers and everyone connected to the club, it has felt like empty promises. Like, words are one thing, actions are another. And I think he spoke with conviction. But for me, it would be the atmosphere. You know, you go to the games, even if people listening don't go to the games, you know, there was a time it wasn't buzzing like this, win, lose or draw. There wasn't unity. It was kind of a frosty atmosphere. Like, I go back to kind of tying to what you said. Exactly. Kind of tying into what you said about Granit Xhaka, bro. Like, I remember that game with the infamous him throwing stuff, and he's made unpopular decisions. You know, the world wanted Granit Xhaka gone. Mikel Arteta took him and kept him, and it's it's clear to see, really, you know, when he actually left the club to when he was going to leave the club. You know, I think that's testament to Arteta, and you've touched on it. I think he's strong in his convictions. You know, I'm sure he would say he's made mistakes. He'll make mistakes again, but, you know, he's made difficult decisions and they've worked. So with that being said, yeah, before we talk about the title race this year, what was your feelings last season, where obviously in August we weren't necessarily, well, we weren't predicted to be in the title race, but as the season went on, we got into it. How did you feel once it became apparently clear that we're in the title race? And obviously, you know, how did you feel when it ended?
Well, obviously, you say we wasn't predicted to be in a title race. I'll be honest with you. Going into that season, I didn't even predict we would be in a Champions League race. We were that far off where we needed to be. So to be in that title race for me was absolutely unreal. No one expected it. And obviously, unfortunately, we didn't get the job done. And it's such a shame that we didn't get it done, because to go from, you know, sheer mediocrity, and that's the only way that I could explain Arsenal before these last couple of seasons, to being in that title race and being competitive once again. This might be slightly unpopular, what I'm about to say, but I wasn't...
say it, man. You're allowed your thoughts. This is what you're here for, man.
Absolutely, yeah. I wasn't particularly heartbroken about the fact that we didn't win it. And the reason behind that is, obviously, I'm sad that we didn't get it done in the end. But, you know, I always look at it in the situation where we wasn't supposed to be there. And obviously, people will say we bottled it. But I was just more happy that the fact we were competing again. You've got to walk before you can run. That's the way I see it, Deluded. And I think this season is the season that now we've proven that we can be in that title race. This is where the expectation, in a way, should come in. Obviously, we've still got a lot of games to go. We've still got 8 games in the league, 7 games in the league left. Sorry, we're in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. There's a long way to go, and I said it on my last fan cam for AFTV. Actually, I think it still counts as 9 cup finals. That's the way I'm looking at it. Every game now.
You're not wrong.
Is a cup. Every game now for me is a cup final. So I'm absolutely buzzing to be back in the challenge again.
So if we, you know, to be devil's advocate, and I think you're spot on for what it's worth, yeah, and that, you know, last season versus this year. Do you have any confidence in us doing it this year? You know, not to put you on the spot. And if you do, or even if you don't, what changes have you seen to make it at least more amicably if it doesn't work out for us?
Very good question. I would say, I don't want to say I'm full of confidence. And the reason behind that is because, you know, we've been here. We've quite literally been here before. 7 games to go, top of the table. We saw it last year. It didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to. I'm actually more confident at this point than at this point last year. Because obviously I say we're not the team being chased anymore. We're at the top of the table. It's only on goal difference at the moment, but we haven't been the team at the top of the table all season that we were last season. So I think that's taken a lot of pressure off of us in that sense. And not having that pressure on us, I definitely feel like is going to help us to hopefully get it done. And I think it's going to be such a tight race between us, Liverpool, Manchester City. I actually genuinely believe that this title race is going to come down to something as crazy as goal difference. I think it's going to get that close in the title race towards the end of the season. I think it's absolutely fantastic that we're in a situation now where we're scoring lots of goals. Our goal difference is 51 at the moment. I can't remember the last time we had goal difference like that.
Andy's clean sheets, bro. That's
absolutely clean sheets. What's that from? Was that 12 from David Raya?
Lost count. Honestly, I've lost count, man. Every day I wake up, there's new Raya stats, there's new XG stats, second balls won. There's all positive statistics that, in many ways, we're the envy of the Premier League. Now, obviously, you have to give respect to Pep Guardiola and Manchester City for what they've done. Liverpool are a big club as well, and they've won leagues. And you know, while it was a war against City won the war, they did win some battles. In your opinion, would it be fair to say that we're the best current team in the Premier League in terms of how we're playing, what we're doing?
Well, it's hard to argue when you're at the top of the table. You know, the best team's at the top. And I think in terms of the way we play, it's up there with a Manchester City for me. And obviously, you see, we've scored the most goals. We've conceded the least amount of goals. So I think it's hard to say anything other than we are currently the best team, not just in the Premier League, but of course, it's the top league in the country. So you have to say at the moment, we are one of the best teams in the country. As to whether we are the one, you're going to have to ask me after game week 38 and see where we are after that.
You're bang on the money, man. You know, you mentioned scoring goals, yeah. What side of the camp do you stand on in terms of we needing a striker?
I think that should be priority number 1 in the summer transfer window. Do you know what it is? I don't want to hate too much on Gabriel Jesus, and I don't want to hate too much on Kai Havertz, who's playing fantastically at the moment. By the way, when Kai Havertz first came in, I don't think anyone really ever saw him as the striker, the 9 that he's turned out to be this season. I think it was very clear that Arteta brought him in to sort of play that Granit Xhaka role, and it was a bit weird.
Was you
to see
convinced
that
by him
because
as well, adding into what you're about to say? I want to know.
No. So when I saw that signing, I've just thought to myself, what on earth are we doing? And I'll be honest with you, I'm glad I'm being proved wrong at this point in time. Because if I'm proved, absolutely, if I'm proved wrong about Arsenal and it's positive, then it benefits me. If it benefits me, it benefits Arsenal. And if it benefits Arsenal, I'm over the moon. So to see how well Kai Havertz is doing at the moment, fantastic. I still want to see a little bit more maybe for the £65 million price tag. I know he can't help his price tag as per se, but when Arteta spends that amount of money on a player, you need to see results. And if he keeps up playing the way he's playing, then absolutely, I think he's going to eventually justify his price tag. But £65 million, 10 goals, not a terrible return at all by any means. I'd say an average return at the moment. If he can maybe, if this is where he's going to play, push towards that 15, 20 goal a season mark, I'll be over the moon. But until then, I think priority number one needs to be a striker. And I obviously mentioned Gabriel Jesus just a moment ago. Fantastic player. I don't think there's any sort of doubt about that. However, he's not your 15, 20, he's not your 20, 25 goal a season striker that you need almost to have, unless it's like a Roberto Firmino kind of thing situation. And Gabriel Jesus is definitely not that striker for me. We need an absolute monster up top. And I think that's the one thing that this Arsenal team is lacking at the moment in terms of, really taking over the world and sort of taking over Europe. If we had that 25, 30 goal a season striker, then I think we are a real force going forward. And I think we should, if we get to that point, we can absolutely start expecting to win your Premier Leagues, expecting to win your Champions Leagues. It's just about getting that right player in. So if for me, if we was to only sign a striker, I would be more than happy with that. As long as striker is number one priority, I don't care what we sign from there. I think we've got a great squad. We just need that one striker.
What profile striker? Obviously, you're not the transfer man. You're not the one who makes the decision. But you see, you don't live under a rock. You see all the names we're linked to. I'm sure you have all the conversations. What profile of striker? And if not striker, what name would you want?
I've got two names. I've got three names, but one is sort of only kind of if we can't get one of these two. The three names that I've got are number one, Victor Osimhen. Number two, Alexander Isak. And number three, if we can't get either of the two, Ivan Toney. Now, the reason that I put Ivan Toney...
Rank them as well, before you carry on. Rank them.
So what, in terms of ability or in terms of who I'd rather sign?
Yeah, the second.
So in terms of number one for me has to be Victor Osimhen. I think over the last few years, you've seen the level of ability that Victor Osimhen has shown, not just in Serie A, but on the European stage as well. I know he didn't have a fantastic AFCON, and people sort of hang on to that a little bit more than I think they really should. But, he's European proven, not just Premier League proven in a way. He's done it in the Champions League. He's not quite won, of course, the Champions League, but you can't help the fact Napoli haven't been of Champions League winning quality. But if he was to come to Arsenal, I definitely think we would become the caliber of team that can expect to be winning Champions Leagues. And he's not had he's had a great season for me, in my opinion. He's not had as much game time as he would have normally. 26 games, 14 goals, 4 assists in all competitions. I think that's a fantastic return. That's an 18 goal involvement for a player that's played 26 games this season. I think
that's actually quite good.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. And then you move on to Alexander Isak, and probably this for me, if we was to get this done,
he's an Arsenal man.
He's an Arsenal man. I think we was linked with him before he went to Newcastle, and there was all the craziness going on about us tracking his car.
Following his car, yeah.
Listen, if we was to sign one of those two, the level of player that they are and the kind of players that you are, almost complete forwards. You look at Victor Osimhen, explosive pace, strong aerial ability, and clinical finishing in front of goal. And then you move on to Alexander Isak. For a player of his height, Isak is exceptionally
mobile. He's like a 5'6" Spanish midfielder.
This is what I'm saying. He's got plenty of technical ability. And for me, these two just sort of signal, the complete forward that we've been lacking since the Thierry Henry. By no means am I saying they're going to be of Thierry Henry caliber.
I think most people understand what you're saying there, man.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the two for me. And then if we get to it, and the reason that I'd put him at the bottom, Ivan Toney, again, no doubting his ability. But when you look at the situations that we've had in the past with Aubameyang, and this would be the prime example, the ego of the player. We've seen he's had different situations at Brentford where there was videos of him
every week. There's videos or
every
interviews moving mad.
Exactly, every single week there's videos of him disrespecting the club in some shape or form. And I feel like if Ivan Toney is to come into Arsenal, I think it's only a matter of time before that relationship between Ivan Toney and Mikel Arteta sours. I think I can see that happening. Him coming in, playing unbelievably well, but then something happens behind the scenes. Too big for his boots, and for a player that we're looking at £100 million for, that can't be happening. Absolutely not.
I'm with you with that, man. I think, do you know what? With Ivan Toney, though, I believe in giving players the benefit of the doubt. Like, I agree with everything you said about him. I think, personally, I think that's why Arsenal are moving away from him, because of how he portrays himself in the media. It is giving a bit diva vibes, not necessarily the gambling stuff. I don't think he would be my first choice, and he wasn't yours either. But I think he's got a lot of transferable skills. I like his mentality. He seems someone like a bit what we're seeing with the boys now. He relishes pressure. The more, quote unquote, out of his comfort zone, the more he's on it. I just think with him, not to be disrespectful to him, it's like having a bunch of girls in your phone book. You want to talk to the more prettier ones. He's the ugly, safe bet, confirm B. You go over there and deal with him, innit? I think that for everybody. Like, I just think he's got a year left on his deal. The striker market's a bit foggy, Frank. Everyone will just circle the block for him, really. But it does seem like we've gone off the boil for him. I do think he would be good. I do think, I think with Ivan Toney, and you probably see it because obviously you're on AFTV, I feel there's too much polarizing opinions with him. Like, some people put him on a level like I don't believe he is. Some people move like he can't really help us. And I definitely wouldn't be singing to the houses and to the cows come home if we signed Toney. But I think it would be a good step in the right direction. And you have seen Mikel Arteta has signed numerous players from the Premier League. We won't speak about Cedric and William. We'll speak about the more other ones. But it's worked, innit? In relation to Isak, wonderful footballer, link-up play, everything. He had a great little spell in Spain with Odegaard, and obviously Odegaard at Sociedad. He'd be lovely. The only thing with injuries, and he'll cost a lot of money. I'm not sure if Newcastle will want to sell him to us. I'm not sure if they'll have to sell him to us.
Obviously, with like you said, with the thing about Newcastle, I think regardless, any of these free strikers, we're looking at the round sort of the 120 million pound mark. And I think the only difference there could be the fact that Newcastle might be forced into selling players because of the financial fair play restrictions that they've got. This is what I'm saying. So while I think transfer market only has Isak down as 70 million euros or something like that. So maybe we can get close to value, much less than we would have normally paid for an Isak, who again, I think we probably should, and we justified the way he's playing at the moment, going from Prem team to Prem team, taking away from a rival in a way as well, a European rival.
Yeah, especially with what Newcastle are trying to develop as well.
Absolutely, this is what I'm saying. And I think for me, whilst I think Osimhen is probably the better player out of all the three, I think in terms of most likely to happen, I think we're looking at Isak, and I would be absolutely over the moon with that as well.
Do you think Isak is worth the 100 million? And do you think Osimhen and Isak, do you think they're worth them 100 million price tags, or are we overpaying?
Well, the answer for me is quite simple. I don't think any player in the world is worth 100 million. 100 million
Crazy, innit? Yeah.
Apart from Declan Rice, so we still owe West Ham a little bit more money for, in my opinion.
Amen. Spread the propaganda, bro.
This is what I'm saying. Look, it's a lot of money, and I think the reason you're paying a lot of money, especially for a striker, is to get the goals. And listen, whoever comes in, if it's one of those three, as long as they score the goals, money's not coming out of my pocket. It doesn't affect me. All I want is to see them score goals for Arsenal. So regardless of who we sign, as long as they score goals, I couldn't care less about the price tag.
I'm with you, but like being devil's advocate, and I always find this, and this is where I'm not Mikel Arteta, neither you are not flies on the wall. As we know, being a striker is a bit of a difficult situation because you could score 20, 30 goals. We literally had it with Aubameyang and Lacazette. Aubameyang, proven goal scorer, people talk about his general play. Lacazette could do all the other stuff, a bit like Gabriel Jesus, could do all the other stuff, not a consistent bagsman. And I don't want to sound crazy, but you could argue, obviously Mikel Arteta knows you need goals in that, but you could argue goal scoring is the least important sort of metric for a striker, because if that was the case, probably wouldn't see Kai Havertz up front, probably wouldn't see Gabriel Jesus, Nketiah or Trossard, not to knock them. They just don't have that proven pedigree. They're not the highest goal scorers typically in their sides regardless. So it's like, how do we judge it then? Because as much as I want someone that just wants to stand in the 6-yard box and bag, is that a fallacy to think a striker, obviously Arteta could change things, but whoever plays up front is almost like our first defender. Do you think it's a bit of a fallacy to just expect like just an organic goal scorer? Like Lukaku's a terrible example, but in terms of him being just a goal scorer, do you think it's a fallacy to just expect someone like that?
Not necessarily. In a way, yes, because like I said earlier, the prime example that I used there was Roberto Firmino, and obviously he done wonders for Liverpool.
That's a shout.
But he wasn't necessarily scoring your 20, 30 goals a season. What he was doing, he was a different kind of striker that was helping and getting more assists, if anything, than goals. And I wouldn't even say we necessarily have that in our 9 position. It's quite a weird one that we've got because we haven't got that clinical finisher at the club, like you said. And we haven't exactly got a Roberto Firmino type either. So I definitely feel like you need one of the two. And I actually believe, I said something quite crazy in the January transfer window. Obviously, Roberto Firmino wanted to leave Saudi Arabia. I genuinely was of the belief that if that option was available, I think that bringing in a Roberto Firmino on loan would have been a fantastic signing for Arsenal, because you look at the work that he did with Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah.
Premier
If
League
we could get something,
well.
exactly, Premier League proven, Premier League winner. If we could get a Roberto Firmino type in this Arsenal side and sort of replicate what he did with Mane and Salah, with Martinelli and Bukayo Saka, can you imagine the sheer amount of goals?
Like the no-looks finishes and that. I mean, I'm biased to Brazilian players, innit? I'm down for the cause, man. So I'd be all for it, man. I wanted to ask you a bit of a left question, yeah. Like, I believe what you're saying. I think we need a striker. I personally feel, regardless of the goals we've scored, I think there's been occasions where we've probably needed a goal scorer. You could argue that with Porto at home, even though we got the job done and we are scoring a lot of goals. But then I look at West Ham at home. I look at West Ham at home. I look at Aston Villa. I look at Newcastle. To a degree, even the City game. Maybe if we take nothing away from our players, if we just had a clinical guy that just needs an opportunity to put the ball in the back of the net, then as you know, that turns some defeats. Not that there's been many into draws, some draws into victories, ultimately more points on the board. But when you look at our goals scored and whatnot, and the fact that the goals are shared out, do you think us Arsenal fans are overstating the need to sign a striker?
No, because like I said, I think this is the piece of the puzzle that is missing at the moment. Like I said previously, I think I'm of the opinion that if we had that 20-30 goal a season striker last season, we potentially would have got it done.
Yeah,
and
a half decent defender that's better than Rob Holding, respectfully.
You've just given me PTSD. You're giving me PTSD. But yeah, like I said, I think we need that, certainly, especially if we might win the league this year without it. And if that's the case, I've been proved wrong. But to stay in that competitive stage and that state, and continue to challenge for the Premier League title and the Champions League if we get past Bayern Munich on Tuesday or tomorrow, of course. I think we need that striker that's going to score you 20-30 goals a season.
I mean, I know you said it that you'd quote unquote be happy. Not that you'd be happy, but if we signed a striker and nothing else, you can kind of live with that. Do you really feel like you would be, though, if we signed an Ivan, Toney and Isak or whatever, the summer window's closed and we go into next season without a striker? Would you really be happy?
If we went into the next season without a striker?
Oh, sorry, with a striker, just with this big money striker and nothing else.
I wouldn't say that I would only sign a striker. I would say as long as the striker is the priority, and I think it's quite clear that needs to be the priority. If you look around the rest of the squad, for the first time in a very long time, we have a really good squad available once everyone's fit and available, which they do seem to be now. I saw some news earlier that Timber's back and available for selection potentially. Not that I'm expecting him to start, of course, But look, as long as we've got everyone available, I think we have a really good squad. And I feel like the problem that Arsenal have had is we've always had a great starting 11 over the last few years.
I know what this is.
However, but we've never had the squad that a Manchester City has had, that a Liverpool have had. And I feel like we are now at that stage where, if we was to only sign the striker that I feel that we need, unless players are to leave, for example, like an Aaron Ramsdale probably is looking likely to leave, only sign the players in the positions where you sell players. I think that's the way we need to look going forward, because I don't feel like we need anything particularly apart from this striker at the moment. But if players start to leave, then we obviously will need players to go and fill in for them. Absolutely.
All right, stick a pin in that, Just assume we signed a striker. We've signed a striker in the summer, Obviously, let's just disregard that players can leave and the playing squad's the same. Mm-hmm. Now you have to sign other areas in that squad. Where are you going? What are you doing? If not necessarily names, what areas?
I think the other one that potentially sticks out for me, and I don't necessarily know the kind of player at this time that we would be looking at, but I feel like we do potentially need to get some cover for Bukayo Saka out on that right wing. Obviously, we've got a winger. I know we've got the likes of Reece Nelson and Leandro Trossard, but it's quite clear, and I really don't know why, because I feel like when he's came on, apart from maybe the Luton game where he started and didn't make necessarily much of an impact, Reece Nelson is a really good squad player and potentially could be that player that could fill in for Bukayo Saka in the event of an injury or something like that. But I just think it's clear that Mikel doesn't trust him, and it's a really strange one to me because he's given him the new contract, and since then I think it literally feels like he's played 3 minutes combined. It's such a shame because I think he's such a good player, and I know he's been linked with Brighton recently, and he's a bit of a weird one because if he was to stay at the club, I'd be happy. But however, if we were to sell him, I think it kind of makes sense if we can get the right amount of money for him, and if that was definitely to be the case, which is looking likely because Arteta just clearly hasn't got any plans for him, we would definitely need to be looking at some sort of cover for Bukayo Saka. As to who that would be, I don't quite know at this stage. You'd have to ask me at another time.
I think that, I think all us Arsenal fans are universally
Yeah.
agreed in what we need. For me, with where we look at, the winger or the striker, or just call it attacking options, I'm a bit flexible in that I want a striker. Again, I've seen Thierry Henry recently. Not recently, but we've had Aubameyang. It's nice to go into August and that he's going to be up there with Harry Kane, Salah, Haaland, regardless what happens, he's going to bag goals and whatnot. So I still think we need that. And you look at City, who 9 times out of 10 were winning leagues and doing all these things, but they had goals spread out with the team, but they never had like that bagsman per se. I know they had Sergio, but you could argue the minute Pep walked in, he kind of like decreased their need on Sergio Aguero, but they still went and got Haaland. So I don't think you're wrong with that. I'm a bit flexible in terms of the profile. If it's a poacher, a target man, a selfless act, maybe it could even be someone of, I don't have an example to hand, but you can play up front, you can play out wide and all of those sort of things. Maybe it's two of the same. Me personally, bro, I think we need a central midfielder because I feel Declan Rice is the only one that provides longevity. You look at our attacking options, Trossard's probably the only exception. Everyone's got age on their side. Defensively, the same. The midfield is where it gets a bit cloudy. Jorginho's a good player, but in comparison to Declan Rice, it doesn't matter what. Exactly. And plus, it doesn't matter what we're going to do for me. Whatever Arteta is doing tactically, Declan Rice is going to feature. It doesn't matter how he's trying to play. Declan Rice is there. We don't necessarily have that with Jorginho. It depends on the game state. Thomas Partey is a quality player, but as you know, there's a lot of baggage that comes with him, and we've had the same old stories with injuries. You got the Smith Rowes, the Fabio Vieiras, the Kai Havertzes, people that have played in that left 8, but haven't necessarily convinced Arteta for whatever reason. I think we need that long-term Rice partner. I think we attack better, we defend better, even though we've been amazing this season. If we get that, I would not be against another defensive option. My first choice would be someone like Timber or Tomiyasu. They can fill all across. But if we signed a centre-back that could play right-back or a centre-half that could play left-back, I'm okay with that.
I think a name that sort of springs to mind there, and I think there's been a few links with him recently. The young Dutch defender from, I think it's Ajax, Jarell Hato. I think
does it make sense for him to leave though? Like I would sign him and say stay there for a year, because you're 17, 18, you're playing week in, week out.
Similar to Saliba in a way.
Do the Saliba thing. As much as I would like him integrated, and next season I want more depth, it would make sense really and truly. And obviously you said it with Ramsdale, he's probably going to depart. We probably need to look at a goalie. Where Nelson's concerned though, I think it's interesting though, because if I'm Nelson, I get it. You've come through this academy. You've been a little boy to a young man to a full-fledged adult. Obviously, we're doing great things as a club. There's an element of trust from Mikel Arteta. Last season against Bournemouth, you kind of endeared yourself. There was a point this season, as you said, it felt like he was playing 3 minutes, but he was quote-unquote impressing with it. But when our form dropped off towards the end of last year, it was the same old players. Now, I'm not criticizing Arteta. That just tells me, for better or worse, they're the guys that he feels, if worse comes to worse, they can act what you need to do. So he probably needs to move on. I think with the homegrown rules, I don't think we're going to sell Nketiah, Smith Rowe, and Nelson. But Nelson, it probably is time up, even though it'd be sad. Yeah. What have you made of Smith Rowe?
Do you know what? I really do feel sorry for Emil Smith Rowe, because I feel like again, limited time. And the best stat to sort of sum this up, his last goal for Arsenal was nearly 2 years ago now.
It makes me cry every time someone says that.
It's insane. Do you know what it is? I feel, when I say I feel sorry for Emil Smith Rowe, he got that big injury, didn't he? He got that big injury, and what happened was there were so many players playing so well last season in the positions that he plays that he sort of just fell out of favour, and that is in no way, shape, or form his fault. The only thing, this is, of course, absolutely, it's just it is what it is in a way, and the only thing I can be slightly critical of Arteta for is, not taking the FA Cup as seriously as we probably should have, not taking the Carabao Cup as properly as we should have, because this is where you would be able to see these kind of players getting minutes in order to impress, in order to play in the Premier League, and it just hasn't been the case this year. So in that sense, I really, really do feel sorry for Smith Rowe. In terms of his future at Arsenal, I definitely still think there is space for him. I would be gutted if we was to see Emil Smith Rowe go. With Reece Nelson, like I said, I don't feel any particular way about it. If he was to stay, I'd be happy. If he was to go, I'd completely understand, and I'm sure we'd get around, that £20 million mark for him, for the kind of player that Reece Nelson is. And you mentioned Nketiah. I think that's a no-brainer for me. I think it's time. It's time over for Eddie Nketiah. Don't get me wrong. I've met him. I've been privileged enough to meet Eddie Nketiah on a few occasions. He's a great guy. But I just don't feel like he is up to the level. Exactly that. I just don't think he's of the level where he needs to be, and maybe he gets a lot of hate, and we sort of expect more from kind of. It sounds silly to say, but the number 14 of the club. I don't think giving him that legendary number has helped him done him any favors either. I genuinely believe that at a lower level team in the Premier League, Eddie excels. He's just not of the level of Arsenal Football Club, unfortunately.
What's your thoughts on Zinchenko and Thomas Partey? This is where it gets interesting. Two very polarizing footballers as well. They're quality players, but they polarize the fan base.
Absolutely. I'll start with Zinchenko. I feel the situation with Zinchenko is he was brought in to serve a purpose, and we've sort of outgrown the purpose that he came in to serve. He played obviously fantastic exactly the way we wanted him to play last season, and I think he's done what he needed to do there, and it's just not necessarily working out for him this season. I think, his defensive ability is being really exposed this season. I think when we need a goal and stuff like that, he's fantastic going forward, but, he's a defender. He needs to be able to defend, and I don't think he has... Exactly. I don't think he has the necessary ability to, remain in that left back position on a consistent basis for Arsenal. And that's the reason why you've seen a Tomiyasu be converted to an inverted left back, who I think is superb there, by the way. And I think it's exactly the same situation with Timber coming back. I expect him to be playing over Zinchenko, in my opinion, as well. So if Zinchenko was to go this summer, I wouldn't feel any kind of way about that. I think he's got some form of purpose still in this Arsenal squad, but it's not a starter for me. And then the one that really hurts is Thomas Partey, because I don't think there's absolutely any way you can doubt his ability. But
it's the other stuff.
You're lucky to get 15 games a season out of him over the last couple of seasons, and it's such a shame, because it almost reminds me of Jack Wilshere in a way, in the fact that he's excellent. He's an excellent football player. He's just never there, and for the money that he's on and the money that we pay for him,
as well.
There you go. Absolutely there. I think it's a bit more than Diaby in a way, because obviously he's on so much money and he cost us so much. He cost us so much money as well. I expect him to go. It's just such a hard one, because I don't want him to, but I would rather get the money back where we can and sign someone that's going to be a lot more available to Arsenal.
Would it be fair to say we've got the best defensive duo in Gabriel and Saliba in the Premier League?
That's the easiest question you've asked me all day, to be fair. And not just in the Premier League. I think we've got the best defensive duo in the world right now. And people will say that I'm talking crazy here. But and let me back up what I'm about to say. As a pairing, I think they're fantastic, the best in the world at the moment. I understand. But this is what I'm saying. I understand that there's probably better individual defenders out there. Like, for example, I'm not saying that William Saliba is a better defender than Van Dijk, for example. But I'm saying that the pair of them, as a two, there's no duo better in the world right now. Absolutely.
So what do you make when you tie in Benjamin White? What do you make of Benjamin White?
I think he's great. I genuinely think.
I think today, actually, for March.
Yeah, so congratulations to Ben White. I don't think, while obviously, William Saliba and Gabriel will get all the credit, and rightfully so, I don't think there's any way of underestimating the level of ability that Benjamin White has, and what he's done for this Arsenal team as well. Remember, he didn't really come in to be a right back. We signed him as that centre back, and we saw that last season when he was playing there. He's fantastic, and it's crazy because I didn't expect this from him. Similar with Ramsdale as well. When we signed all these players, we spent big money on Ramsdale and Ben White. And initially, I think everyone was thinking, "What are we doing?"
Yeah, we saw what Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville had to say.
There you go. So, the level of ability that he's shown, he's right up there with, and it's such a shame that we're not going to see him for England this summer, because I think he really benefits that England team.
He deserves it. But it's not.
It does, but exactly. It's not a footballing decision. I think it's quite clear that there's some sort of bad blood still in that team. I know Gareth Southgate came out. Yeah, I know Gareth Southgate came out and said that he wanted Ben to be a part of his England team, but the hesitance seems to be on Ben's side, and for whatever reason that is, you've got to sort of respect it, because he's not just gonna, he's not going to come in when he's not happy about something, and I respect the hell out of him for it, and hopefully lessens the possibility of injury in the summer. So hopefully Ben White's fully fit for next season.
Exactly. You kind of touched on it, yeah. What have you made of Ramsdale currently from, what's obviously happened away, finds himself, and obviously subsequently you've got Raya. What have you made of the goalie situation?
I'm glad you asked me this question because, as some of you may know, I'm a goalkeeper myself. Not that it's going very well for me out there.
I never knew that. I never knew he was a goalie.
You know what? No, yeah, do you know what it is? People, I'm only about 5'8", and that's not great for a goalkeeper.
Yeah, you're on a Shay Given thing, man.
Yeah, I'm on a Shay Given. Yeah, but I've fractured my finger at the moment, so it's not working too well for me at the moment. But yeah, I like being asked questions about goalkeepers because I feel like I can relate in a way. I was quite surprised with the Aaron Ramsdale situation because when David Raya was brought in, I was of the belief that, the two goalkeepers, who I still to this day believe are of similar ability or the same ability. They're just better at different things in a way. I think Ramsdale's the better shot stopper. However, I don't think he's the most intelligent of goalkeepers, and we've seen it with his concentration and stuff like that. Whilst Aaron Ramsdale is the goalkeeper that's going to make your camera saves and stuff like that, it's mainly usually because he's in a position that he's not supposed to be. David Raya won't make necessarily amazing camera saves all the time, but he doesn't have to do that because he's always in the position where he can come and collect the ball instead, or he can come out and receive the ball. So I think that's what I mean in terms of him being a more intelligent goalkeeper. But in terms of the situation as a whole, Arteta brought Raya in, so it was going to be a 2 number 1 situation. And everything we've seen since that point has said differently. And I understand as a goalkeeper myself that Ramsdale's confidence is going to be knocked because of that, and I think it's underground.
Yeah, it's in hell. It's actually in hell. Like it's 2 games against Brentford. I thought he looked shaky away from home. At home, obviously, he made that error in what could have been and could be, especially with us being in a title race now. You don't know if it goes down to the last day. That could have been his last kick of a ball at the Emirates, which is sad, man, because you didn't want it. You didn't want him to make that mistake, but unfortunately, when he made that, I think every Arsenal fan probably thought and could see the headlines. That's why David Raya was brought in.
Of course, absolutely. And the only criticism I'd have of Arteta in this situation is I think he's been slightly unfair to Aaron Ramsdale. A big reason as to why we have got Champions League football again is because of Ramsdale's heroics last season. And I think people forget that, and especially Mikel Arteta, because, again, the game time's been limited. I think it was absolutely criminal that Aaron Ramsdale hasn't yet made a Champions League appearance for us, considering he was monumental in getting us back to this position, and it's such a shame. And like I said, I think he has definitely played his last game for Arsenal. Touch wood, unless obviously David Raya gets injured. I'm still sure he'd find a way not to play Ramsdale in that situation as well. I think Ramsdale's made it. I was going to say last kick of a ball, but he's a goalkeeper. He's played his last game for Arsenal in my head, unless David Raya does get injured. I'm just hoping that he doesn't. And I think a lot of the news at the moment is that Chelsea want him, and I really don't want to see that happen.
Being devil's advocate, just being devil's advocate, because he could, just based on what you said, do you think Mikel Arteta owes Aaron Ramsdale anything in that regards? Because you are right, he did help us get the Champions League, but in Mikel Arteta's defense, just being the purely devil's advocate, he's got to do what he's got to do to get us back to where we need to be. No,
of course, absolutely, and I completely understand that. But there's been situations where, for example, when we'd already qualified out of the group, why wasn't Ramsdale given a chance? You know what I mean? And I think stuff like that, because I was at the who was the French team that we played? Was it Lens? I was at the game we won 6-0. Why wasn't Ramsdale playing in that game, for example? Like I said, he was so monumental. Could have been.
No, I'm joking. Ramsdale don't deserve that, man. Big him up.
Absolutely. And do you know what? Regardless of what happens, I just want to say thank you to Aaron Ramsdale for me, and this might be slightly controversial as well. If you look at, when would you say, apart from obviously Ramsdale and stuff like that, who would you say was Arsenal's last great goalkeeper?
I don't think we've had one. I think you're going back to David Seaman or Jens Lehmann. I definitely during the Emirates era, there hasn't been too many that I feel are like, wow. Like Ramsdale at the time of him, getting PFA nominations and all of that, he obviously gets my respect. I like the way David Raya is going. Emi Martinez had his look. He was here for a while and didn't really show that, but when he got his opportunity, he looked decent. I thought Leno had a lot of issues, but I think there was a lot of times we'd lose 3-4, 5-0, and Leno actually was probably one of our better players, but our defense weren't quite there. I don't think Czech was the signing that we was projected to have, but I don't think it was as bad as Arsenal fans made out, but he had his issues. So, to be honest with you, like Ramsdale, and I don't know if I've said it, but Ospina was crap. Matt Turner, in my opinion, was crap. Runnison, it goes without saying. Ramsdale's been one of the, better keepers in the Prem. I mean, in the Emirates era.
This is what I'm trying to say. For me, I think he's the best goalkeeper that we have had since Jens Lehmann, and I don't think people realise that. And have sort
only 25 as well.
This is what I'm saying, and I think people have almost forgot about his heroics over the last couple of seasons, bar this one. to get us to the point where we are now. And I think he deserves a lot of respect for that. And I don't necessarily think he gets that from the Arsenal fans. But I completely get what you're saying about being devil's advocate. I wouldn't say that Arteta owes it to Ramsdale. I understand that you've got to move on to keep growing as a team. I just feel like Ramsdale could have been given a fairer crack at the whip, as to say.
I don't think you're wrong, man. I mean, there's a couple questions in the chat. What would you make of potentially signing Everton's Onana, the central midfielder, and potentially Pedro Neto from Wolves?
I'm glad you said Everton's, because I didn't know if it was Manchester United.
Yeah. There's like 20 million Onanas in this world, man.
Yeah, better to play me in goal than Andre Onana for Manchester United, that's for sure. Even fractured finger and all. I think Onana would be a good one. I'll be honest with you, it's not a player that I've not really watched much of Everton this season. So I'm not going to say that I'm familiar with his game fully. I know he is a good player, and I can sort of see him going back to what you were saying about having that cover for Rice. I can sort of see that happening, that kind of sign, especially if Everton can get relegated. They can't be demanding all these massive fees for the players. So if we was to be able to pick up a player like Onana from Everton for around, that 30-40 million mark, which is still a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but in today's market, it's kind of peanuts.
Really in today's market.
And yes, it's pennies if they come in and do a good job. We've seen it with Leandro Trossard, £27 million, and he's performed well over what anyone was expecting of him. So absolutely, I'd be open to the idea of Onana. Pedro Neto, I think that's a slightly different situation. Again, no doubting his ability. I just don't think Wolves are going to go down, and I think they're going to demand a pretty penny for a player of that ability. And I don't necessarily think that that's the kind of player that we need to be spending that kind of money on at this point in time. But absolutely, no doubting his ability at all.
I think you're bang on the money, man, and that's the issue. And I guess that's why I'm happy we're not in charge of transfers, because there's a lot of players that I feel are good players and can bring something to the table at Arsenal, but them being the right signing for Arsenal is a completely different thing. What did you make of the Brighton game?
That's a great game, a thoroughly professional performance. We look at the run of fixtures that we had going in towards the end of the season in the title race, and I think a lot of us saw that game as one of the harder fixtures. Brighton have been somewhat of a bogey team since coming back up to the league. We've only done the double over them once, and I believe that was the 2020-21
No one really
season.
wants to play Brighton, man.
No one really wants to play Brighton, especially not from home. And like I said, they've caused us struggles over the years. I remember that Basuma clip where he absolutely ruined our Champions League hopes, and they've done it a few times.
That pains me,
They've done it a few times, of course, but who's laughing now? We're in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Basuma's struggling for game time at Spurs, so I think
you're playing for Spurs in itself.
There you go. That's tough enough. So I think we won that battle, but like I said, Brighton have been a notoriously tough team to go up against since they've come back up to the Premier League, and to beat them, not only beat them, but beat them so convincingly when a lot of us had our doubts whether we'd be able to, do so. Really impressed me. Like I said, very thoroughly professional performance, and it fills you with confidence going into a game like Aston Villa, who again have caused us troubles over the years, especially this year. Obviously, they was one of the first teams to beat us in the league, and when you perform so well away from home, going into a home game against probably a team of equal ability in terms of difficulty, it fills you with confidence. Absolutely.
So how do you feel about this week then? Because I think you're bang on. And I think the thing with the Brighton game, it's a bit like off what we've been doing this season, in that I feel this year, in that players have come in, they've done well. Players that have played, the continuity is continuing. I don't think, not in a bad way, but I don't think we was amazing against Brighton. It's not the best I've ever seen. I think it was a professional performance. In a nice way, I think there was a lot to give. Yeah, and that's something I actually like, that there's that medium. And I feel Brighton actually not that we was under the cosh, but they started well. And I obviously saw your chat. Yeah, I saw your charity boxing. So boxing is the best analogy in that. I think Arsenal have learnt to box smart. For many years, we was either 1,000,000% or we're zero. So now
very one-dimensional.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like now we're jabbing when we need to jab. We're fighting another day, but when we can pick our punches and land those knockout blows, we're doing that. It goes back to what you said earlier about defending well and scoring. Football's a simple game. We're literally keeping balls at the back of our net, putting balls in the back of other nets, and we're actually amazing then. Obviously, this is a big week, man, because we've got Aston Villa on the weekend. Just before that, we've obviously got Bayern Munich. What's your thoughts going into the Bayern Munich game? Harry Kane and Gnabry and Thomas Tuchel, and what it could mean if we can not only get past the quarterfinals, but go the way through. What's all your thoughts in relation to the game?
I'm going into the game surprisingly with quite a lot of confidence. Big up Bailey as well. I've just seen him in the chat. Yes, Bailey, how's it going? I'm going into the game quite confident, and I remember the last time you played Bayern Munich.
Please don't remind me. I don't remember it. I'll remember it.
I'm looking at the shirt that we was wearing in that game, and it brings back terrible memories.
Cricket scores, man.
Cricket scores, absolutely. But you look at their form this season, and I think it's a completely different Bayern Munich team. I think kind of the roles are reversed in a way. We're not going into the game as heavy favourites like Bayern Munich were at the time, of course, but we're definitely going in. Obviously, Bayern Munich have lost their last 2 games, including quite an embarrassing defeat. I believe they were a newly promoted side.
Yeah. I think they took the lead and then bottled it as well.
Of course, absolutely. They were 2-0 up, went on to lose the game 3-2. I know they lost the game before that as well. They're really, really struggling in the league. So that might sort of get them more up for a Champions League game where they still think they've not struggled as much in the Champions League this season. So they might be up for it in that case. I think the situation regarding the home game and obviously them not being allowed to have their fans at the stadium is going to be a big plus for us. Absolutely. Because we're going to have, sold out at the Emirates, 60,000 strong in the Emirates getting behind the team. And I think that's definitely going to help us.
We can win this competition, but go on.
I really do hope so. Absolutely. But in terms of this quarterfinal specifically, I can see us getting it done at home. I don't want to say too convincingly. I can see us. I'm looking at a 3-1 score tomorrow. I think it's a given that Harry Kane finds a way to get a penalty and scores that. I think it's obviously just going to be a bit awkward away from home. What I can see happening in this 2-legged affair is a 3-1 win away, 3-1 win at the Emirates. Sorry, and then potentially just like a 1-0 loss at the Allianz, which still takes us through.
I mean, that will take us through, and it goes back to the City game. I'm sure you do the AFTV stuff, so you've probably battled with rival fans. It was a boring game against City, blah blah blah. That's great. They can have that. I don't want. If entertainment is Liverpool versus Man United or Chelsea Man United, I don't want any parts of that. But to know that we have a plan B, not even that's a plan B, because we've shown across all aspects we're a better defensive side. So it doesn't surprise me where Arteta has put an emphasis on defending the last 2 years, and really since he signed for this club, on being more solid. That we've been able to go there against City, stink up the place, lower mid blocks, and just suffocate them and deal with that in that regard. So that gives me a lot of confidence if we are going. Obviously, there's psychological factors which I feel that makes the Champions League a step too far for us at this moment, because I think in hindsight, the 2 games against Porto, a couple of our players kind of showed that. But that gives me a lot more confidence in theory going to Bayern Munich away from home. If you do go through playing Manchester City or going to the Bernabeu, Real Madrid. And I think it's a psychological test as much as anything. I think you made a great point there where you said, they've been kind of crap domestically. So that could give them a kick up the arse to try something in the champs. You do see that. For me, I just want us to relish it, if I'm honest with you, and have nothing to lose. It's a very condensed fixture calendar list. What would be your 11? Because some people are, left back is up for debate. In theory, Zinchenko, Tomiyasu, and everyone can play there. Do you go with Jorginho and Partey? What's your starting 11? I think I can guess 4, but
yeah. So obviously, he's not going to go for Ramsdale and goal, of course. So it's going to be David Raya and goal. I think that's the. Yeah, you're obviously looking at White, Saliba, Gabriel. Left back, of course, is where you said it gets interesting. As long as it's not Zinchenko for this game, if it's Kivior, whether it's Tomiyasu, I don't mind. I think actually, to be honest, Kivior would actually be there on merit, because I think he's played so well there at the moment. I understand it's a different animal in Bayern Munich, and this is the reason I don't want Zinchenko out there. Sorry, because the idea of Zinchenko versus Serge Gnabry, Leroy Sané,
all them
petrifies me.
Injured in a way, really.
Absolutely, and I think that Tomiyasu and or Kivior are more suited to that matchup. I think Tomiyasu defense. I keep mixing the name up. Zinchenko, we're looking at a potential disaster class out on that left hand side if we start him against the Bayern Munich side. That are going to be on the front foot. Absolutely. So I think as long as it's not Zinchenko, I'm quite happy to see Tomiyasu there or Kivior. If I had to lean,
if I had to push you for an answer between,
if I had to lean towards one, I would actually go for Kivior. And the only reason being, normally I would go for Tomiyasu, but his minutes have been limited since returning from that international duty where he picked up the injury. So I think it's a little bit of a risk to start him in such a big game like this. I see Tomiyasu starting the game against Aston Villa, for example. I think for this one, you have to go for Kivior, and that's purely that is based on merit at the moment, not just because I feel like it's the only option. Absolutely. So I think it's going to be a big challenge for him, and I think he's definitely suited to that challenge. In terms of the midfield, this is where it gets interesting, and the reason I choose this midfield is because I didn't see what I think we should have seen against Brighton. which was Thomas Partey, Declan Rice, and Martin Odegaard. I think the game against Brighton was the perfect time to see that midfield three, the midfield three of dreams, in my opinion. But I think
we've been starved of that trio in midfield this season, sadly.
Absolutely. And I think the perfect time to have seen that would have been against Brighton. He opted for Jorginho, of course, which is not the end of the world. Jorginho has been playing fantastic as well. And I do expect to see that same midfield three again in terms of Declan Rice, Jorginho, and Martin Odegaard. And up top's where it gets interesting, because I feel like, someone has to miss out here. And this is going to raise a lot of eyebrows, I suppose. But I believe that person that has to miss out in this situation is Gabriel Jesus. I think, obviously, Bukayo Saka's a given on the left. I think we need to see the return of Bukayo Saka on the right, I think we need to see the return of Gabriel Martinelli on the left. And up top, you can't argue with his form at the moment.
Can't look beyond Kai Havertz, isn't it?
Has to be Kai Havertz.
He's playing in, you know what? I always, on top of Kai Havertz's form and whatnot, I do think this is the point of the season. Like, everyone's got relative experience, but in these kind of competitions, I look for Jorginho. I'm not saying I would start Partey. I'll do the midfield you would, but this is where I want Jorginho to be that senior figure. Declan Rice, you've got many a transferable experience. You've won a European Cup. Kai Havertz, you've obviously won one as well, and you're going to be playing Germany. I'm sure there's an extra bit of it. You've seen the afters him and Muller have been having. I'm sure his family group chats are going off. That's where I'm looking at them. I must admit, though, I am tempted to start Gabriel Jesus off that left, because he has saved his best football for the Champions League. And when I did a previous stream a few days ago before we played Brighton, I actually leant more towards Jesus because I didn't know how Martinelli was going to recover. But in the past few days, and the people, including yourself, that I'm doing chats with, I'm being converted. I think Martinelli, that fearless approach, again, neither of us are watching Bayern Munich every day, but they look vulnerable. As great as they are, they're still Bayern Munich. I'm not saying to underestimate them, but they look like they can be got at defensively. And I just feel with Martinelli, he's got that pace, he's got that ferociousness. He's probably our only player that he's not direct's not the right word, but he's direct. He's in your face, running behind and things like that. So I would probably lean towards Martinelli. I think Kai Havertz gives us a lot as well in terms of all the other aspects, not necessarily goal scoring, although one love for his form. So yeah, I think I've got the exact same lineup as you. I think Benjamin White, Gabriel, Raya, Saliba, they pick themselves. Kirill Tomiyasu is a bit interesting because I think Kirill deserves it. I think his form's been there. I think in theory he should be the first name on the team sheet. But if he was to put a gun to my head and my life is over if we don't win this game, with all due respect to Kirill, and like you said, Tomiyasu is not the fittest of players. But if I felt it was win or die, naturally I'm going to lead towards my comfort zone, which is Tomiyasu. He's our best long-term defender. And you said the names there, the Gnabry's, the Kanes, all of these scary guys. And I think the only issue, I actually think broadly with Zinchenko, on top of all his strengths and weaknesses, he's obviously an athlete, he's a professional footballer, but we've got physical giants or beasts, really. Benjamin White's a beast, good in the air. Saliba and Gabriel, obviously, you know that as well. Tomiyasu and Kirill. I think Zinchenko is not really an athlete like that. He's not a unicorn, a physical unicorn like Timber, and I think that's where the system's kind of leaving him. I do remember he had a great game at the Bernabeu, but I'm not playing Zinchenko. A lot would have to go our way for Zinchenko to kind of come on the pitch. And naturally, unfortunately, with Zinny, if you was to name our strongest 11 from last season, or just put in Declan Rice next to Partey or whatever, Zinny, like this year, it's not that he's a bad player. You're the one they look at and say, we can get some change out of you. It doesn't mean they can't. They ain't seen weaknesses in Gabriel and Saliba and White or whatever. They just look at Zinny and say, the space you leave, you go to sleep, we're getting at you. So that's a myth. I would lean towards Tomiyasu. For me, I'm with you. I think Partey, Odegaard and Rice has to go out there. I think the one thing I think a lot of Arsenal fans are saying is Kai Havertz has to play, and that's testament to him because nobody really cares about the 65 million chance. So I'm on that, man. It's another big week of football, really and truly. In theory, are you more confident about winning the champs? And again, anything's a given, but nothing's a given, sorry. But are you more confident about winning the champs or winning the Prem? Because, yeah, you can look at our league form, but some Arsenal fans argue, we're more of a cup team at times. It depends who turns up on the day and things like that. So, yeah, what one would you think is more attainable in theory?
I think that the more attainable at this point in time would be the Premier League. And by no means am I saying, that would be my preference. Now, of course, I'd rather win the Champions League. With the Premier League, we've been there and done it. Only team to do it invincible as well, of course. We've never won that Champions League. And it's,
I want to cry you saying that.
Listen, bro, my first ever memory of Arsenal was the 2006 Champions League final. That's my first ever memory of Arsenal.
I knew you'd say that.
So I would rather win the Champions League in terms of what's more realistic at this stage, however. And I think it ties into, the fact that Mikel hasn't been the best for Arsenal when it comes to these two-legged affairs. Of course. I still feel like we get through Bayern Munich. I just feel like it's a different animal when it comes to a Manchester City or Real Madrid in the semi-final should we get through as well. And I don't want to say, I'm expecting it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were to get eliminated at that semi-final stage in the Champions League. I don't think any team would realistically be expecting to get past a Real Madrid or a Manchester City over a two-legged affair. If we can do it, absolutely. Road to Wembley continues. But in terms of the more realistic option at this time, I think we're definitely looking at the Premier League. We're back in a situation where it's in our hands. Admittedly, it's only on goal difference, but we are the top of the table. We're there for a reason at the moment, of course, as well. We've still got a tricky run of fixtures going in towards, really pushing for that title. But if we're going to get one of the two done, it's definitely going to be the Premier League for me.
Do you think we need to win every game?
100%. I think I tallied it up. I'm of the belief that, I think we've done it at the point. I think me and James did it on AFTV after one of the fan zones. With 27 total points that we could get. I believe we need to get 25. I can see the other two teams getting 23 points, which obviously wins the league by 2 points. Liverpool.
Yeah, I don't think it's going down to goal difference for what it's worth. Personally.
Of course, I think it's that. I could see that happening, but
the reality.
Of course, absolutely. I think Liverpool have already got one of those draws in the game against Manchester United, and I think definitely can see another draw coming out of them as well. I don't think Liverpool will have the strength to continue it going, continue it on till the end of the season. Manchester City is the scary one for me, though. Of course, they're a different animal. They're going for the 4P. What they're calling it? Is it something different that they're calling it?
I don't even know, but you're right. It could be 4 on the spin, On top of just winning the treble last year. Like, Pep's bad news for the league, man.
No, of course, but even to be fair, I feel to answer the simple question, simply yes. And I think it's only because of that Manchester City factor. I don't see Manchester City losing another game. And if they don't lose another game, it's then down to us, obviously having more points than them at this stage in time to do what we need to do on our side. And that, for me, is 90% likely to involve not losing a game for the remainder of the season. Whether we can do that or not, only time will tell.
Only time will tell. It's a difficult one. Do you feel like, because me and you have both kind of, not that we've disregarded, when we're just talking about Bayern Munich, we focused on Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli, and I won't say we disregarded Trossard, but we didn't, none of us mentioned him. Do you think there's a case of him starting against Bayern Munich?
Good question. Very good question. Obviously, Leandro Trossard's been in fantastic form, especially this season, performing well over what I expected of a player, A, of his age, and B, of a player that costs £27 million. I think he's been a fantastic
value for money, isn't it?
I was like, one of the best for me, just below Jorginho, one of the best value for money signings that we have seen under Mikel Arteta, in my opinion. But the honest answer to the question is going to be no. I don't see, again, I think for me, Havertz has to be in that 9 position. And I think because of that, obviously, you haven't got the option to play Gabriel Jesus in that winger role. That striker role, sorry. And then I think in terms of Leandro Trossard, my choice would be Martinelli on that left-hand side against Bayern Munich. But I could also see Gabriel Jesus slotting in there again. I'd be more than happy for either of those two to slot in that row. And because of that, I think Leandro Trossard misses out.
And I think with Trossard as well, one thing I'll give him, I know it's not just Trossard, and I don't have the statistics to hand, but, it's fair to say our subs have really saved the day on occasion for us, the football club. I don't know how the Bayern Munich game is going to go. Obviously, in theory, making subs can be proactive, but if we need a goal and I'm looking at Trossard to do that, that would be reactive. I think he really impacts the game off the bench. Like, obviously, there's been games he started well and done well, and I'm wary of drawing conclusions, but for me, if I had to think of Trossard, not that he's a bench boy because he should get more minutes. You wish he could play 12 players, but he seems like he's more impactful and exciting when he's a super sub or impacts it off the bench. And we're going to have to be a bit cute and clever. Like whether it's Kiri or Tomiyasu, I don't think either player, for example, is going to get 90 minutes. Definitely with Tomiyasu against Bayern. So it's now the time for Mikel Arteta to kind of be cute and clever with his squad. Last couple of questions for you as well, yeah. Who would you give player of the season to so far?
Oh, that is such a tough question.
Tough question. There's bare guys that could have.
I think you're looking at four players, and I think it goes without saying for the first two in William Saliba and Gabriel.
100%.
You're absolutely.
Do you think Gabriel gets sorry to cut you as well? Do you think Gabriel now he's getting his flowers, but do you think he gets enough flowers?
From Arsenal fans, yes. From neutral fans, absolutely not. I don't think they understand the level of beast that we've got on our side here at Arsenal. And it's understandable because they don't want us to have that level of ability in this team.
They don't want us to be lit, man.
They don't. Sorry to quote DJ Khaled, but they don't want us to win. And I don't think anyone understands the level of ability in that.
They don't like us now that we're half decent.
Of course. So in terms of player of the season, like I said, we're looking at 4. One of those two, absolutely no way, shape or form that we can forget Declan Rice in this. The standards that which he's set, at least an 8 out of 10 every single game. And like I said earlier,
can you even count on one hand games he's been poor? And when he's been poor, if he has been, the whole team's been shit.
The 2 games against West Ham, that's literally the only 2 that I can think of.
Some say Porto at home, but I think they're doing too much there.
So Declan Rice, again, I still think we need to give West Ham more money for him. I think it's been an absolute steal. The first ever £100 million bargain, as I'd put it. And the other one for me has to be Benjamin White. I know there's probably quite a few names that we're missing out of there, but I don't think we are anywhere near where we need to be at this stage if it wasn't for Ben White on that right-hand side as well. So those 4 for me, absolutely.
And I think you're bang on. I think one thing that's underestimated for talking about ability, it's a bit harsh and injuries can happen to anyone, but is availability. Now, I think one of the next steps for Mikel Arteta is having more durable players, because there's a handful of players, Declan Rice, people get injured, but Saka, Declan Rice, Gabriel, Saliba, Odegaard, a couple of others. They're the ones you can kind of bet on are going to be fit for the majority of the season. All the rest, they pick up 1 week and 2 weeks and a couple of months and whatnot. But Benjamin White has reacted to Tomiyasu improving and obviously Timber, Kirill as well. I think Benjamin White deserves it. I think Gabriel and Saliba, as you said there. I know Saka isn't as amazing as he might be projected to be to some fans based on last season, but we've got to remember what he is doing. He's still
30 goal involvements in all competitions.
Oh, it's ridiculous what he is doing. So he deserves that. I wouldn't give it to Kai Havertz, but because of the low expectation, I think he deserves to have a hail up. Declan Rice, as you said, speaks for himself. If I had to give it to one, I'm going Gabriel, It's between Gabriel and Benjamin White. And I think I'm being a bit biased to Gabriel because for years I have said he needs more flowers. Like Benjamin White, pick him up as well. But if I had to, it's harsh because they all, you probably have to break the trophy and everybody kind of share it really, or no one gets one. But I would say first place, Gabriel.
Yep.
Second place, Benjamin White. Big up the defenders. You know what? Gabriel / Saliba, you count as a duo. So what? I've gone first place, Gabriel, Saliba, you get a hail up. Then I went Benjamin White, Declan Rice. But it's not Declan Rice's fault, but you've come in off top of being a new signing as well, so you've got a bit of that. I think Odegaard deserves his flowers, and I wouldn't be surprised if Saka wins it. I'd give it to Gabriel. I'd give it to Gabriel, Benjamin White, because it's never really going to go to the defenders, really. And even that, you could say Declan Rice as well, because Benjamin White, Gabriel, Saliba, they've become that core nucleus that's unbreakable, really.
No, absolutely. And I'll be honest with you, I do believe it's probably going to get given to Bukayo Saka, and I wouldn't be against that. 30 goal involvements at this stage of the season is not something to be looked down upon. I have this argument with people every single week. A player that's definitely of world-class ability for me. I don't think you can argue with those numbers. I think world-class Phil Foden has only got 1 more goal involvement in, I believe, 8 or 9 more games. So no, it's it's one rule for one rule for the other.
Or is it Cole Palmer? I don't know. There's always a new contender for Saka's place.
Of course, there you go. It's just, again, people don't want us to win. They don't want to put Bukayo Saka in that discussion, and I don't think it's a debate anymore. Bukayo Saka's a world-class ability, and so if he was to win that Player of the Season, I wouldn't be against that, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I like to go. I would want to see someone else win it, and I think there's a lot of contenders for someone else to win it. And you know what? If I had to be pushed for one, I would probably, especially if we win the league as well, it would be Gabriel for me. Absolutely.
Do you know what? Playing devil's advocate, my last question for you, if I had to say signing of the summer, so I'm pretty sure I could guess you'd say Declan Rice, me the same. But then if I flip it on its head, I think Timber could have been there. Unfortunately, got injured. I wouldn't give it to Raya, but the very fact that nobody's really clamoring for Ramsdale to start shows Raya's been all right. But could you argue it's Kai Havertz? Because everyone already had high expectations of Declan Rice. Nobody really had faith in Kai Havertz. Like for me personally, when we signed Raya, Timber, and Rice, I was cool with that. When we signed Kai Havertz, it was more of my faith in Mikel Arteta. I didn't think he was a bad player, but I didn't see how he gets us to the next level. So for me, with his low expectations on the floor, and we're talking about quarterfinals, he has to be in the team.
I'll give you my opinion on the Kai Havertz situation. Obviously, his output now, fantastic. I think he's contributed to 14 or 15 goals this season. But this reminds me a lot of, I believe it was last season, where from February onwards, Marcus Rashford went crazy terms of his numbers. And I feel like that's what you're seeing with Kai Havertz in this situation. Since the turn of the new year, since the return from the Dubai trip, we're seeing a much better Kai Havertz. And obviously the numbers are showing that. And obviously you've got to give him full credit where credit's due. But it's worth not forgetting there was still 20 games before this run of form where he wasn't playing to the level which he probably should have.
Helped him going up front versus centre mid.
Yes, absolutely. And obviously, I think, I'm glad that Mikel Arteta understood that as well, because I believe at times he was being a little bit stubborn when it came to playing Kai Havertz in that midfield role, and it was clearly not working. So I'm glad that Mikel Arteta adjusted correctly and that it's working now. So just for that run of the first 20 odd games that Kai Havertz had where he wasn't performing to the level he should have been, I wouldn't have him as player signing of the season. And I think, like I said, for someone that's putting out minimums of 8 out of 10 every single game, it has to be Declan Rice, 100%.
To be fair, it's a good debate, man. Because I say Declan Rice, you should win it. I say Gabriel, you should win it. Benjamin White, you should win it. Bukayo Saka, you should win it. And as you know, Frank, we prayed for times like this. We prayed for moments like this, like smiles on our faces. Lord knows there's been so many tears supporting this football club. Yeah. And hopefully we can keep going. Obviously, this has been fantastic, Frank. Let people know where they can find you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you can see me on every game on AFTV doing the watch along and the information station. So obviously make sure to head over to AFTV, especially for the game tomorrow. And then obviously you can find me personally. The only real social media that I'm active on is my Instagram. You can find me at Frank Hastings AFC. So make sure to give that a follow, and I'll see you guys there.
That you heard the man. Follow the guy up as usual, Frank. Big up you for getting on the channel.
Thank you very much. Absolutely, this has been a long time coming. I think I've done okay considering I'm working off of about 4 hours combined sleep over the last 2 days because of WrestleMania.
Bloody hell. Yeah, let me let you get out of here, man. Go to your bed, Frank, man. For one love for tuning in. Come on, my guy, man. Let me let you go, man. But people, I'm sure you've agreed, disagreed, got your own thoughts on everything we've discussed. So yeah, follow Frank on his socials. Let us know in the comment section what you lot thinking. Hopefully the good times continue. But for now, peace, man. We're out. Safe. Always